E-commerce sales in Latin America are on the rise, and the space is expected to keep growing to reach $160 billion by 2025. That's according to Statista. Mercado Libre is looking to capitalize on this, with its unique monthly users surpassing 100 million for the first time in its latest quarterly report. The stock is up over 50% so far this year. Mercado Libre CFO Pedro Arnt joins us now. Pedro, great to have you here with us this morning. First and foremost, just kind of walk us into where you're seeing sales continue to trend well for the company and what you're seeing among the consumer appetite to continue purchasing on the e-commerce platform.
Sure. Hi, Brad. Hi, Julie. Thanks for having me on. So Latin America is still relatively early compared to more developed markets in its transition from offline purchasing to online purchasing. So we continue to see significant growth across most categories. Even the earlier categories to move online, such as consumer electronics, continue to be relatively underpenetrated. And we're seeing the first steps of some of the later categories to move online. For example, groceries, which is a nascent and still small business for us, but growing really fast, also beginning to emerge. So it really is across a broad spectrum of consumption where Latin American consumers are seeing the relative efficiency of buying online, the deeper selection, the better prices, and are moving a lot of their purchasing from offline to online.
One of the other recent developments in the Latin American market has been the bankruptcy filing for Americanas, which was a Brazilian competitor. Talk to me about the dynamic now that maybe there's an opportunity, and it looks like you have already been gaining some market share as a result of that. What is the opportunity still further created by that?
Yeah, so clearly when an event of this magnitude occurs, there is a shift in market structure. So many consumers who normally were purchasing on that competitor's website potentially are now looking to shift some of their online purchasing to other websites. And so we did lean into specific incremental marketing spend during the first quarter in an attempt to be able to capture ideally an over-indexation of those consumers that were looking for new alternatives. And given the strength with which we started out the year, we did see an acceleration in our overall volume growth rates and a pickup in market share in Brazil. So our general sense is that those efforts to really attract many of those consumers that were looking for a new home in terms of their online shopping didn't end up on Mercado Libre. So that's done nothing but strengthen what was already the leadership position in Brazil into an even greater market share and acceleration in market share gains, at least for these first 3 months of the year.
Pedro, how does Mercado Libre plan to leverage kind of the platform, the data that you have, and drive growth and perhaps expand offerings even beyond just the online marketplace sales?
Yeah. So as you mentioned at the beginning, I think we crossed 100 million active users this first quarter, which really is a staggering number if you think about nearly 600 million people in the region. We operate in many of the markets, but not in all of those markets. So roughly 1 in 5 Latin Americans interacted with one of our properties during the first 3 months of the year. And that obviously generates enormous depth of data and understanding of consumers. And that's been a big part of what we've done to grow the company over the past 20 years, is to follow our consumers into what other digital needs they may have. The most obvious one is Mercado Pago. So that's our initially payments platform, but today really is much more about financial inclusion and how do we extend financial and banking services to tens of millions of Latin Americans that have typically been underserviced by traditional retail banks. That's the fastest growing portion of our business. And we're seeing enormous success there with things like credit, savings tech, and other ways to help Latin Americans really gain access to more and more financial products.
At the same time, many of the same dynamics that are at play here in the U.S. are in play in Latin America as well, in terms of rising interest rates, in terms of concern about global economic growth. So I did see the increase in your loan book last quarter. How is that dynamic playing out with the increase in interest rates?
Yeah, we like to joke at the company that we come from the future in a sense, because things like rising inflation rates, macro instability are part and parcel of what we've been dealing with over the last 20 years across the multiple geographies in Latin America. So in many cases, some of these emerging market tech companies like ourselves are better prepared to navigate these somewhat more turbulent times that we're facing now. So absolutely, higher interest rates are on a short-term tactical basis a bit of a headwind to growth, but nothing new for us. We've been dealing with extremely high inflation across many of our markets for many, many years. Some of our markets like Argentina, inflation is triple digits and has been so for quite some time now. So yes, the challenges are similar, but I think the advantage we face, and our consumers to a certain extent also are much more accustomed to living their daily lives, whether it be in how they purchase or how they deal with banking services in these much more volatile, high interest rate, high inflation environments. And so I think that does give us a step up in that this is nothing new for us, and we know how to navigate through these cycles quite effectively.
Just lastly, while we have you here, Pedro, I'm just wondering, as we think across so many different e-commerce operations, it comes down to delivery of the product too. Where have you seen either kind of challenges or even some opportunities to grow out or have better delivery partners given the number of end users that you're servicing?
Absolutely. And that has become, on the commerce side of our business, the key competitive advantage. One of the gating factors to faster growth of e-commerce throughout the region had been for many, many years, the quality of logistics and the amount of investment that occurred behind logistics operations. And this is something that we set out to solve about 5 or 6 years ago when we launched Mercado Envíos, which is our own proprietary both logistics and technology for logistics offering. The consequence of having invested significantly over the last 5, 6 years is that today Mercado Libre runs the fastest, the cheapest, and the most reliable logistics network in the region. Over 70% of our volume in most markets is already free shipping to our consumers. We deliver over 50% of items within 24 hours or less. And this really has been, I would argue, probably the single largest catalyst in the market share gains that we have been accruing over the past 2-3 years. So having solved logistics in a region where logistics has historically been very, very complicated is a central tenet of our value proposition, both to our merchants and to our consumers.
And looks like to investors too, Pedro. The stock is up some 50% this year, and I was just looking back to your IPO here in the U.S. back in 2007. It's up something like 7,000% since that point in time. Thanks so much for outlining what Mercado Libre is all about for U.S. investors. Appreciate it, Pedro Arnt, Mercado Libre CFO. Thank you.